Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com.
All right, welcome everyone to this new episode of the Journey to the Esquire, the podcast. Today with me, I have a very special guest, Miss Darnesha Carter. She's actually one of our board members here at Journey to Esquire. So, Darnesha, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am very happy to be here with you, John, as I am with you in board meetings and our service to Journey to Esquire. My name is Darnesha Carter. I am a senior associate at Hogan Lovells in their Miami office. I graduated undergraduate at Florida A&M University, and I went to law school at Stetson Law. My first job out of law school was to clerk, and I clerked with Judge Scriven in the Middle District of Florida. And then after that, I went into private practice and have been a commercial litigator ever since.
Perfect. Yeah, we're happy to have you on. Obviously, I've known you from being on the board together with you, but I think this episode is going to be super beneficial to everyone out there. Let's start with FAMU, right? So graduate high school, you end up at FAMU. What made you go to FAMU, right? Like, did your parents kind of push you towards the HBCU or what was that process?
So I actually am a baby rattler. My mom was also went to Florida A&M, and so she encouraged me to apply there. I applied to the other schools too, but I really ultimately wanted the HBCU experience. I think it's one of the best decisions, and honestly, it's my alma mater that I think I tout the most, although I really do love Stetson Law as well. FAMU has my heart, and so I don't regret that decision at all. I had a great experience there.
All right. So when you went to FAMU, did you know right away that you wanted to one day go to law school, or did you just kind of figure that out later on?
So I did. So actually, in my high school, I went to Riverview High School in the Tampa Bay area, and they had these mock trial courses essentially. So like they were actually classes that involved like civil procedure and us running trials, and then ultimately I actually got on our high school's mock trial team as well, just because I just started to develop a passion for the law. Because prior to that, I wasn't really interested in going into law. So then by the time I got to FAMU, I knew that I wanted to do law and that ultimately I wanted to go to law school. So my initial major was political science, and I just really did not like, and I still am not very fond of politics. And so within my first semester, I had switched over to psychology, and then I picked up another major of English, which actually turned out to be super duper helpful in my career. So I just ended up with a double of English and psychology, and then ultimately went on to law school.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And that was going to be my next question, actually, because I saw you double major, which, listen, kudos to you. Sounds like a lot of work. But if there's anyone out there that's in undergrad and they're trying to figure out what can I do to, prepare me for law school, do you recommend any specific classes or minors or any majors, anything like that?
Yeah, and I think political science is a great major for people interested in law, because it introduces you to our government system. So no shade to political science, it just wasn't my interest. But as far as some of the rock hard skills that you'll need as an attorney, I think any major that gets you into research or writing in any capacity, I think is very helpful. And so I would say for me, on the psychology end, having to do research, we had to do our own research projects on different phenomena, on social phenomena, but it still got you involved in that process and looking at other research that had been done and then trying to incorporate that into your research, which is very similar to looking up case law, looking at precedents and seeing what case law favors your position. And then on the English side, it's just having that repetitive reading, repetitive writing, and giving your thoughts and analysis and criticism really to what you read, and having to think critically about what you read. I think that was super helpful. And then honestly, you'd be surprised how much just having a grammar skill set could take you, and you could just be seen as the person who does all of the edits to the motions and the briefs and everything, just because those grammar rules are just, locked in based on what you've done before. So that could be journalism, doesn't have to be English, but any major, I think, that gets you into a lot of writing, I think could be super helpful for law school.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're picking a school as well, because I know some schools tend to be more exam-based versus some are final papers or, kind of essay exams. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because, yeah, you want to be able to have the writing. And I think that's what most people struggle with at the beginning of law school. All right, so then let me dive into mock trial a little bit. So I know you said you did it in high school, you did it in college. Did you find that experience fun? Did you find it helpful to your practice today? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I did it in high school. I didn't do it in college, but I did do it in law school. And so I did mock trial in high school, and then at law school I did moot court. So I kind of went to sort of the appellate level. So I had a little taste of both the trial level and the appellate level. And I think it's great. I think it's one of those things that really can help people who feel like they might have, fear of speaking in front of other people. I think that helped me sort of come up with my, also kind of tease that analytical bone of trying to come up with your best arguments, because really when you're on those teams, it's just you and your team coming up with arguments. It's not you're not really being spoon-fed like you would be in class, where the teacher and then other students around you and the Socratic method are all coming up with different arguments. It's just you. And so I think that was really helpful. Also, the team aspect was also helpful, because I work at a firm now. It's a collaborative effort on every single case that we work on. And so that also gives you a taste of that. It's a exchange of ideas, working with different people and all gearing toward the same goal. I think that was also super helpful. And it was also just really, really fun. We got to travel to the different competitions, and the nerves will get you, but then also you get to see people outside of the academic arena and just sometimes just have a drink with someone. And, it's just really fun to get to know your classmates in a different arena and in different settings. So that was fun too.
Yeah, I can say the best friendships I have out of law school are my trial team friends. I mean, we just, you're there Saturdays, you're there Sundays, you're in the trenches. So
Right.
It's just different. It's different. All right, so let's go back a little bit. So you graduate college, you decide, obviously did pretty well. You can go to law school. What made you choose Stetson, and what was your decision-making process and all that?
So I'm pulling back a little bit, so hopefully I can remember this well enough. But I applied to a lot of schools, and I think I applied to a lot of schools that offered to give me to waive the application fee. I think that was one of my metrics to apply. And I started to get acceptances coming in, and I had ultimately gotten into a lot of schools that were top ranked schools. I got top ranked as far as US News reports, I'll say. And so it actually came down to Stetson and another school that was just ranked in the top 20. But then everything just started to come together with Stetson. So I actually did an on-campus just tour of both schools. But when I went to Stetson, it just felt like home. I met with some of the people in the admissions and in academic success, and it just felt right. Also at the same time, my grandparents, they had left their home to our family when they passed, and their home happened to be 6 minutes away from Stetson. And so it would have cut costs as like living costs to live there. And then I also had a scholarship with Stetson that was just more generous than other scholarships that I had gotten. And it wouldn't have required a move. My family is all in Central Florida, in Tampa and St. Pete. And so all of the signs just started to point towards Stetson. And it's another decision I just really don't regret. I got to meet a lot of the individuals who also got admitted to some of those top schools, because again, I did do some campus tours with various groups of other admitted students at those schools. And ultimately, we came out in very similar places. We're at firms that are on par with each other. I got to do federal clerkships just like those students from those other schools. So I think the resulting effects were very similar, and I got to meet so many great colleagues and professors. And Stetson, I think, just really gives you an A+ education. And then also, nobody can dispute that their child advocacy teams are phenomenal. And so I'm also glad that I got to experience that too.
Absolutely. And as somebody who came from a smaller school myself, I love to hear stories of, people like yourself because there's no question that going to the top 20 school, for example, they're going to roll the carpet out for you to go to big law. But you go to a small school, you gotta fight for it. So to anybody in a smaller school or considering a smaller school, can you talk a little bit about the things you need to do to try to land that clerkship or that big law position?
Yeah, I would say run your own race, honestly, because when I came to Stetson, my whole goal honestly was not, I really want to get a clerkship. I really want to go into big law. I really had not considered big law at all until well into law school. I was planning to be a JAG. My goal was simply to keep my scholarship. I did not want to lose my scholarship. And so I knew that there was like a GPA I had to hit in order to do that. And luckily, it wasn't a situation where I felt like I was in this hyper competitive environment. We shared outlines with each other. We talked to each other, me and my classmates, about different issues that we didn't understand. We would have little huddles about them, and nobody was really trying to pull anyone down. And I think the real course to go on is put in the effort to do as best as you can. Don't focus on other people and try to do whatever you can to beat them or outperform them. Try to outperform yourself. And that's literally all that I did. When I got my grades back, I was just as shocked as anyone else. I was very happy about them, but it wasn't this intentional process of trying to outdo anyone else. And I would say that to anyone going to a small school, big school, whatever school is it, because I think it can be a huge distraction and actually it actually can be a little bit counterintuitive if you lay your focuses on what other people are doing.
No, but I think that's important that you said that, because you'll hear some people in law school that'll say, C's get degrees, and so I think, yes, do the best you can, like run your own race, but at the same time, it is important that you actually do your best and give it your all, because at the end of the day, me and you can talk, just do your best, but the kind of grades that you get, especially coming from a smaller school, it is going to matter. There's no, you can sugarcoat it all you want to, but you got to try your best. You really have to.
Exactly. And I'll just add one point as you make that point. You are not nearly as busy as a law student as you think you are. And I realized that once I became a practicing attorney. And I say that to say, join organizations, join law review, join moot court, do a clinic, join in a court, do something where you are already marketing yourself as a law student. There's so many law students that I know of now that I never went to law school with, that I just know of from Stetson because of how they are out there marketing themselves. And I can just tell you, as someone who reviewed applications in chambers for judicial clerkships, and also someone who reviews now applications for big law. These things matter. You can't just be a C student and get into either one of those categories. So first thing people are going to look at, it, especially if these are your targets, is actually your GPA. And no one wants to reduce you to a grade, but the competition is just very, very stiff when it comes to a lot of these positions. But then beyond grades, we also want to look at people's involvement in either school endeavors or in just the legal community at large. And so it behooves you to use that time. If you got a schedule where you've got basically 2 to 3 classes a day, there's time to invest your extracurricular time in something that also can propel your career.
Absolutely. And I will say this, because I did law review, I did trial team. I was super busy in law school, but I will say that those organizations that are, especially that are student-led, they're going to be sensitive to, they're not going to keep you busy during finals, right? Mm-hmm. They got to take a week off for mock trial. If there's a competition coming up, they're not going to schedule it right after finals. So yeah, you're going to be busy through the semester, but when it matters, you are going to have the time to, sit down and hit the books. And I'm with Darnesha. That stuff is so important that you do it. It's going to set you apart. Okay, so you finished law school, graduated at the top of your class. Congratulations, that's amazing. Tell us a little bit, how do you get into a judicial clerkship? What is a judicial clerkship? What's the day-to-day look like there? What'd you get out of it?
Sure. So a judicial clerkship is where you essentially work for a judge, and a judge, it's really going to depend chambers by chambers, judge by judge, but essentially you help the judge execute their job. And so sometimes that means that you review the motions and you conduct the research on the motions and talk to the judge about what you found and then what you recommend that they do. And it can be a conversation about, what they think and what you think, and it might be that sort of discussion. You might be preparing memos for the judge so that they can either orally convey their order or provide a written order. You might be actually drafting the orders that will then go under the court's review, the judge's review and revisions before it actually gets published. And additionally, you might just be assisting the judge with other administrative duties that the judge may do. And for me, my journey to my clerkship was well, first of all, I'll say I didn't know what a clerkship was, and I didn't know what sort of prestige or anything was associated with it when I first went into law school as a first generation law student. And so I learned about it throughout my time at Stetson. It's something that Stetson is a huge proponent of. And so by the time you're finishing up your first year, you have definitely heard a lot about clerkships. And so I had heard about a Judge Scriven, and how great she was. I hadn't met her yet, but I had heard great things from my colleagues and then also from professors about her. I also knew that Stetson had its own federal judicial internship program where it places students in internships at the federal courthouse, which the way that I would describe the internship is basically you're a clerk for the clerk. So all the stuff that the clerk normally does for the judge, you will be assisting the clerk in helping execute those duties. So you're just like one person removed away from the judge. And so I had my eyes set on trying to get a judicial clerkship, and specifically to try to get one with Judge Scriven. Ultimately, I was able to get that the internship, and at the outset of the internship, I let Judge Scriven know my intentions, that I really hoped that I could, after law school, clerk with her. And I essentially treated my internship as an extended interview and tried to give my best work to her law clerks at the time. I had also provided her with like my resume and everything. And during the course of that internship, at one point, there was just like an impromptu interview that I did not know was happening the day that it happened. Judge Scriven just called me in her chambers, and it just turned out to be an interview. And luckily, the interview went well, and by the end of it, she had offered me the position, and so I started with her immediately after law school, and I stayed with her for the next 3 years.
Okay. And when you were in her chambers, did you see a lot of cases related to your practice now, or was it very broad? Like what were your duties there? What did you see?
Well, that to me was like the best part about the clerkship. So the answer is both. So I got to see a lot of the types of cases that I deal with now, which is typically business to business, business versus business cases that are all civil. But in the clerkship, I dealt with that. But then I also dealt with some areas of case law areas of practice that I simply don't do. For example, employment law. I don't really do a whole lot of employment law, but we got a lot of employment law cases, so I can name off some of the relevant statutes. And then also, like, even outside of civil and different areas of civil that I don't practice in now, that I got a chance to be exposed to the criminal side as well. So federal courts have jurisdiction over civil and criminal cases, and so I was exposed to that as well. And for both civil and criminal cases, if it were a case that was assigned to me, I also got to sit in on all of the hearings regarding the case, including the trial, our post-trial hearings, which was really, really helpful as someone who's just straight out of law school. You're getting to see litigants in federal court, and a lot of times litigants are really trying to be on their best game in federal court, and you're getting to see advocacy in action. Sometimes the advocacy is great that you see, but then sometimes it's just like, okay, these are what not to do in front of a federal judge. And so you get that secondhand learning from sitting in on it as well. And then obviously you get the perspective of a judge who is at all times doing their best to be impartial. And so you might see a case or hear a motion and just automatically think it's got to go this way, and then you talk to the judge and they're like opening your perspective on the other way. I'm like, actually, okay. So then you start to come out, and then you start to think like that too. It's just always even-handed. Like, even though it really seems like the case law and everything is on this side, let me just at least entertain what this other side might be trying to say here, and if it's valid. Because most things, especially if they're in federal court and they're making it on paper, most things are a gray area. Nothing's usually black and white.
Okay. Now, and I know this could probably be its own episode, but I gotta ask you, right? As having sat in a courtroom, not as a litigant, not as now you're looking at something as an impartial person in the courtroom, and having worked pretty much side by side with a judge, like, if you had, I don't know, one or two tips to litigants, how to be more persuasive, how to present their case, briefs, literally anything that you, in a very short time, I guess, what would your advice be?
I think one piece of advice, and this is something I still coach court teams for Stetson, and so this is one thing that I tell the oralists who I'm preparing, and that is to be reasonable. You don't have to fight every single point, and when you do, then it makes it seem like, okay, well, we have to fact check this person on every single thing, because there are certain facts that you're going to have, both sides are going to have facts that are just not good for your side. And if you recognize those and you concede to those, especially if those are not points that are going to be fatal to your overall argument, so it's like the battle versus the war, it will give you so much credence in the eyes of the adjudicator, because they know that you're looking at it similar to how they're looking at it, which again is even-handed. And obviously you have a side to present, but if you come across more reasonable, that I think that will grant you favor. And then I think the other thing is to be respectful, not only to the judge, which sometimes I definitely saw people not do that, some litigants not do that, but then also to the other side. I think that's the one that I think really trips up individuals. And a lot of times you don't even see it in the actual court proceeding. Again, people are on their best behavior, but people submit email exchanges between them and opposing counsel, And it just doesn't reflect good on either party when both sides are snapping at each other. That's why I'm also super cognizant of that, even as a practicing attorney, because there are some opposing counsel that are just rude. And so you have to just remember not to respond in kind, just for the benefit of your own professional reputation and for the benefit of your client.
Now, so you finished this great, sounds like you had a great experience at this clerkship, and then you move on to big law. Now you're a commercial litigator. Tell us about that. What is it like representing businesses? What's your day-to-day as an associate look like? And, how you made it to be, I guess, from a brand new associate to now being a senior associate in a large respected firm like yours.
Sure. So the day-to-day changes depending on what's going on and how many fires that need to be put out. But generally, I'm at the senior associate level. I'm at the stage where I'm strategizing and offering opinions based on what I notice about the case, based on my limited experience with some of the subject matter with the partners, and trying to come up with a strategy and then executing on that strategy. So I'm definitely still writing motions and writing pleadings and everything, but I will say, as I got to the senior associate level, I started to be a little bit more involved in the strategic planning for the case. I would say probably as a younger associate, it was much more of discrete assignments, researching, doing discovery review, all of which I think is really, really important to growing as an attorney, because you just have to see things enough to then be able to come up with ideas on how to approach things. And with regard to the practice area that I do, I think I still get a little bit of a variety. I do a lot of medical insurance cases. This year I've gotten to do some arbitrations, which was a little bit new to me. Construction laws is one that I also have had a lot of experience in, and also working on cases involving financial institutions. And so I think it's been really great. I get to work with the business personnel for a lot of our clients. And so a lot of client contact is another thing that I think also got revved up as I became a more senior associate. And I think that's also a great skill. And that's a skill that I think can kind of fly under the radar as you're practicing or as you're becoming an attorney and growing as an attorney. Everything that you do as an attorney is not in the courtroom, and everything that you do as an attorney is not necessarily related to law. You also, I think it's important to sharpen your emotional intelligence skills as well. Learn how to talk to clients and convey, information that they might not think, that they might not necessarily agree with, because we are within the boundaries of what the law allows us to do and what the law and what precedent has said. And so we might have a losing argument here and there, and you might have to communicate that, or the client might be frustrated with certain things that are happening and that might be out of your control. And so you have to also work on your people skills too to be a lawyer.
And I think that takes confidence, right? It takes confidence, and it takes you gaining the respect of the clients and of your partners and things like that. And I know, at least in my experience, that's not something always you walk in the door with, obviously being first generation attorney. So can you speak a little bit about that imposter syndrome, and how you overcome that?
Yeah, I think you should just go in knowing that you're there for a reason, and that reason is that you're qualified. And I think the thought should be the reverse, is that maybe they think I'm not as good as I am, and they just need the time and the opportunity to see that I am. I've had that situation, I think, occur more so with clients more than the actual individuals that I work with. But I've had some contentious clients that challenged me on a lot of things at first, and then after I demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about, then we become best friends. And so if you experience that hurdle, just know that you're not alone, that also happens. And it could be because of things that are out of your control, like the color of your skin or your gender. I definitely think that microaggressions are real, and I've experienced them. I think it probes you more to be excellent and to not take on the imposter syndrome rhetoric, because you really do belong there. And especially as a person of color, it's important that your voice is heard. So, and I know I know people say it a lot, there's rules on how to act and how to assimilate, but if you start to alter your voice too much in order to fit in, then you're doing a disservice, because just diversity and inclusion is about having different people with different voices come into a room, so that for the benefit of a client, for the benefit of good quality work, for the benefit of different perspectives. But if you feel like you've got to change in order to fit in, and you do that, then what happened to the different voice? Now it's the same voice. So I that's something I would say I struggled with in the beginning of my career, and now I let myself be me more, much more often. Obviously staying professional. Obviously no one can be exactly who they are outside of work, at work, but at the same time, you don't want to lose yourself. So.
And I'm sure your teams are better for it. So Darnesha, you've been great. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. Really, really glad we had you. And to anyone out there that is new to Journey to Esquire, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn. We're literally everywhere. And yeah, give the podcast a follow. I think you could benefit from it. Right.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John.
All
right. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. Support, share, subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.